Ted Bundy?
What if I told you the most charming serial killer in American history was once a Republican campaign volunteer, a law student, a man who jumped into a freezing lake to save a drowning child, and a man who worked the night shift at a suicide prevention hotline, saving lives, right next to a woman named Anne Rule, who would one day write his biography, called The Stranger Beside Me. His name was Ted Bundy, and by the time the state of Florida strapped him into the electric chair on January 24, 1989, he had confessed to murdering 30 women. Investigators believe the real number was closer to 100. He was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24, 1946, in a home for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont. His mother was 22 years old. His father was unknown. He was raised believing his grandparents were his parents, and his own mother was his sister. His grandfather, Samuel Cowell, allegedly threw his own daughter down a flight of stairs for oversleeping, swung neighborhood cats by their tails, and kept a violent pornography collection hidden in his backyard greenhouse. In college, Ted fell in love with a young woman with long dark hair parted in the middle. Her name was Stephanie Brooks. She broke up with him in 1968. He never recovered. Every single woman he would later murder looked exactly like her. Then on July 14, 1974, he walked into Lake Sammamish State Park in Washington with his arm in a fake sling. He approached young women. He introduced himself only as Ted. He asked them to help him load a sailboat onto his Volkswagen Beetle. In a single afternoon, he abducted 2 women, Janice Ott, 23 years old, and Denise Naslund, 19. He kept Janice alive in a remote location for hours. He forced her to watch Denise die. He would later confess to FBI agent Bill Hagmaier that he decapitated about a dozen of his victims with a hacksaw. At one point, he kept 4 severed heads in his Seattle apartment. He told Hagmaier, "I became their god." On June 7, 1977, while acting as his own attorney in a Colorado courtroom, he asked to use the law library on the 2nd floor. They removed his handcuffs. He opened a window. He jumped 25 feet onto the street, and he disappeared into the Aspen Mountains for 6 days. 6 months later, he did it again, from the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs. He starved himself, losing 35 pounds. Then sawed a 1-foot square hole in the steel ceiling of his cell. He crawled through the crawl space, dropped into the jailer's empty apartment, put on civilian clothes, and walked out the front door. They did not notice he was gone for over 15 hours. He fled to Florida. And on the night of January 15, 1978, at 2:45 a.m., he entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University through a back door with a faulty lock. In less than 15 minutes, with more than 30 women sleeping in the building, he bludgeoned, strangled, and bit 2 women to death. Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy. The bite mark he left on Lisa Levy's body was the first time in American legal history. A man was convicted of murder by his own teeth. 3 weeks later, he abducted and murdered a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. She was his last victim. His Miami trial in 1979 was televised live to 250 reporters from 5 continents. On October 9, 1980, during a separate murder trial in Orlando, he called his fiancée Carol Ann Boone to the witness stand, and while questioning her as his own attorney, he used an obscure Florida loophole to legally marry her. In open court, in front of the judge, he told her, "I do hereby marry you," 17 hours before his execution. He blamed his murders on pornography in a televised interview with Dr. James Dobson. Bill Hagmaier later said, "That was a lie. Ted told me he killed because he enjoyed it." At 7:16 a.m. on January 24, 1989, Florida State Prison asked for his final words. The man who had murdered women and then returned to their bodies for weeks looked at his attorney and his priest and said, I would like you to give my love to my family and friends outside the prison. 2,000 people cheered. They wore t-shirts that said, Burn Bundy. The most charming man America had ever met was also the coldest,